They literally limited his interaction with the outside world. They also limited the negative press coverage. It's like a child. We had like a kid running the country. So let's get to it. Is Biden quiet quitting in his final days in the White House? Now, this is a media coverage over the Wall Street Journal article that came out yesterday that dove into the way that Biden's handlers have managed his obvious mental decline.
All of these sort of walls up.
Yeah.
And the walls kept getting higher and higher as the years went on.
This is the biggest scandal in America. And the level and volume of people who dedicated themselves to lying.
What's the point of being a hater like you are? I don't know, man. Are you happy? Don't talk about my Polish country, you glazing. I don't know. You just a hater. Keep it real. What's the point of being a hater like you are? I don't know. Are you happy with your government? Polish chatter? You think it's good? You think things are going well? You got everything you want? I don't live in Poland. Wait, why the fuck are you defending Poland if you don't live in Poland? We moved when I was 2. Okay, well, whichever country you live in now, are you happy with your country? Are you happy with the way that things are going? You think, you'll retire at a reasonable age? You think you'll own a home? Kinda. Okay, even kinda means that there's still room for improvement, don't you think? I've never met a single person that has ever been like, no, I love everything that the government does. Everything. There's nothing better can happen. Even liberals have issues, and they're the most like good things are not possible as people I've ever met. So yeah, now you understand. This is the same way Alman Turks talk about Turkey. Should I join the Teamsters as an Amazon employee? Yes. All right, let's continue.
To everyone at home about this man's condition for 4 straight years up through this summer is breathtaking. It's a scandal of epic proportions, and it's a fair question to ask. Who is running the country? Who has been running the country? And as I said earlier, if you're worried about Donald Trump's advisors having influence, for the last 4 years, apparently this president, duly elected, but this president was not capable of fulfilling the duties of the office. And his staff and the White House lied about it and kept it from the American people. It's an absolute scandal.
Look, I'll say 2 things. One is that I think Joe Biden, despite all this, had a very successful tenure. You may disagree, but I think on policy as a Democrat, he had a very successful 4 years. But there's a bigger problem here. And that is that I think Democrats are at the point where Republicans might have been right after the Bush election or after the Bush term was up, which is that I think Democrats are starting to mistrust their institutions. And this goes back to a bipartisan effort to lie us into the Iraq War, not just by George Bush, but also by a lot of Democrats. It has to do with the fact that Barack Obama did not hold anybody accountable after the 2008 crisis, which also happened in George Bush's watch, but he became president. He never threw.
I guess they're slow walking themselves into some semblance of recognition. I don't know. Like, it's a little bit too little too late. And perhaps more importantly, you and your chat is a hater bubble law. Y'all haters. All right, man. I'm afraid you are perhaps making all of the other Polish chatters in the chat look bad by behaving like this. I tried to have a normal conversation with you, and it seems like it's impossible. Yes, Tupac for life. I think that there's good reason to hate on your government if it's not giving you the things that you deserve.
Hostage on the tarmac from Wall Street. You saw the rise of Bernie Sanders as a result of that. And you saw a lot of institutional Democrats, me included, saying, no, this is not the time. We have to stick with the institution. And I think you have a lot of Democrats now, me included, who are pretty sick of the institution and trusting people in the institution. And this
You're
is
a Democratic strategist. What do you mean? That's kind of funny.
just one example, most recent example, I think, of people institutionally lying to the American people. And what you're ultimately going to see, and I don't have a problem saying this as a Democrat, is that you're going to see a Tea Party version rise up in the Democratic Party based on the fact that this is yet another marker of people just not trusting our leaders anymore. And I'm sorry to say that, but I think we brought this on ourselves.
Yeah, I remember so distinctly when the Wall Street Journal's first story came out and the uproar about it among Democrats and the the anger that they were making things up. In this story, they have multiple sitting members of Congress on the record talking about how they hardly ever heard from the president. They're chairmen of their respective committees, going all the way back to the Afghanistan withdrawal. I mean, this is something that they told the public was a Joe Biden decision. And according to this article, he was not really a huge part of rationalizing it, even to his own party among the elected officials.
But I think there is, like, I don't know if everybody's looking at me like I'm supposed to be defending the Democrats right now.
No.
Because, like, I think the interesting thing about this entire question is, like, when even the Democratic institutionalists realized, like, this dude can't be president, they said he can't be president, and then didn't blindly defend him. You know, he would have been running for a second term except for the Democratic Party. And now and there were people who always thought that this man could not be president now, right? But that is not up to, well, that could be up to the cabinet, right? And we were lied to, but I don't know how to defend that because I didn't think he should be president for a second term. I think that the party, when people realized that he could not do the job of president, they did something about it.
There were a lot of people, even at that time, still defending his ability to run for president again. Some people even suggested that it didn't matter whether or not he could continue as president, that he should continue to run.
Even after that disastrous debate on this network, there were some people being like, oh, he had a bad night. He had a bad night. You know, and one of the quotes in that Wall Street Journal piece was, you know, there are good days and bad days. Today's a bad day. We'll deal with this tomorrow. The problem is tomorrow never came. It was just one bad day after another after.
I like the media that basically played the role of lying to the American public so routinely about something that was incredibly easy to comprehend. Like, it's just something you can't hide. When the president has his brain leaking out of his ears, you just can't hide that. You know, it's so visual. It's so graphic that the dumbest American can be like, I know what that's like. That's just like my grandfather, you know, years before he passed away, or maybe months before he passed away. You just can't hide that reality. And they, I think, did a terrible job of trying to do their very best. Okay? I think they try to do their very best on this, and now they have to play ass covering. They have to turn around and be like, oh, well, how could we have known? How could we have known? How could we have foreseen this? Would you say this is relatable to the FDR polio cover-up? Do you mean as in FDR was like hid the truth that he was in a wheelchair? No, it's not. Because FDR hid the fact that he was in a wheelchair and couldn't walk because the American public, he thought, would see him as a weaker candidate. It had nothing to do with his brain capacity. This is far more consequential. I don't give a the president's in a wheelchair. Okay? I care if the president's brain is working. FDR, on the other hand, his brain definitely was working. It's just that he was worried, and because he correctly identified that Americans would consider him to be weak if they saw him incapable of walking. Very different. Anyway, how the White House functioned with a diminished Biden in charge. Aides kept meetings short and controlled access. Top advisors acted as go-betweens, and public interactions became more scripted. The administration denied. Biden has declined. So let's take a look. During the 2020 presidential primary, Jill Biden campaigned so extensively across Iowa that she held more events. She held events in more counties than her husband, a fact her press secretary at the time, Michael LaRosa, touted to a local reporter. His superior in the Biden campaign quickly chided him. As three rode in a minivan through the state's cornfields, Anthony Bernal, then a deputy campaign manager and chief of staff to Jill Biden, pressed LaRosa to contact the reporter again and played down any comparison in campaign appearances between Joe Biden, then 77, and his wife, who was 8 years his junior. Her energetic schedule only highlighted her husband's more plodding pace, LaRosa recalls being told. The message from Biden's team was clear. The more you talk her up, the more you make him look bad. A small correction foreshadowed how Biden's closest aides and advisors would manage the limitations of the oldest president in U.S. history in his 4 years of office. This is propaganda and lies. Biden was just fine. He's just a shy guy. Stop lying to your audience. True. Problematic age gap is so funny to say about someone who is like 7,000 years old and someone who is 6,999 years old. Okay. To adapt the White House around the needs of a diminished leader, they told visitors to keep meetings focused. Interactions with senior Democratic lawmakers and some cabinet members, including powerful secretaries such as Defense's Lloyd Austin and Treasury's Janet Yellen, were infrequent or grew less frequent. Some legislative leaders had a hard time getting the president's ear at key moments, including ahead of U.S.'s disastrous pullout from Afghanistan. Senior advisors were often put into roles that some administrative officials and lawmakers thought Biden should occupy, with people such as National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, Senior Counselor Steve Ricchetti, and National Economic Council head Lael Brainerd, and her predecessors frequently in the position of being go-betweens for the president. So basically, this caretaker government ended up delegating responsibility to appropriate parties, which is why you saw a bunch of stuff that was inconsistent with the 60-year track record of Biden in office. Very important to understand. This is why I've always maintained the position that like it's not the president that is like a standalone figure that ends up dictating policy. Although the bully pulpit is probably one of the strongest parts of the presidency. And if you are diminished in your mental faculties, you are not going to be able to use the bully pulpit to whip Congress into shape, to dominate public understanding with whatever your agenda is. Having said that, however, there were opportunities here, like, for example, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and the formative role that they played in this administration. Labor was basically given out, contracted out to Bernie Sanders, and we saw the results of that. FTC, Elizabeth Warren, we saw the results of that. There were plenty of good things in terms of consumer protections that happened under this administration, and that was because Biden simply wasn't up to the task. So there is some benefit to this. There is some benefit to having this, old man running the show, but not really running it at all. But there was a tremendous amount of awfulness that also took place. The awfulness, of course, came in the form of foreign policy. Okay? They run the show. It wasn't Biden's own personal brand of ultra-Zionist tendencies that caused our relationship with Israel to get kicked into overdrive. It was that the people closest to him in his inner circle also channeled that opinion. Okay? The supposed brain trust, the supposed foreign policy, the foreign policy geniuses. Presidents always have gatekeepers, but in Biden's case, the walls around him were higher and the controls greater, according to Democratic lawmakers, donors, and aides who work for Biden and other administrations. There were limits to who Biden spoke with, limits on what they said to him, and limits around sources of information he consumed. What outlet published this article? Wall Street Journal. We're reading it for free off of archive.ph. Throughout his presidency, a small group of aides stuck close to Biden to assist him, especially when traveling or speaking to the public. They body him to such a high degree, a person who witnessed it said, adding that the hand-holding is unlike anything other recent presidents have had. The White House operated this way even as the president and his aides pressed forward with his re-election bid, which unraveled spectacularly after his halting performance in a June debate with Donald Trump, because 60 million Americans in real time saw that the current president was completely incapable of running the country, let alone putting on his own clothes. The only similarities that I can point to is basically Ronald Reagan in his second term when he had, signs of Alzheimer's or dementia. Here's me calling out Morning Joe.
Critical that we ask the same questions about this man I love, respect.
Bro, take it out of your mouth before you talk into the microphone. Jesus Christ, I'm having a hard time hearing what you're saying over the guac 3000 that you're applying to Joe Biden's shriveled old penis. Oh my Lord, dude. He's got tears. He's got tears because it's jammed up his throat. He's gripping, dude. Holy moly. Make no mistake, this was after Americans had already realized that the game was up. Vice President Kamala Harris replaced him on the Democratic ticket and was decisively defeated by Trump in a shortened campaign, leaving Democrats to debate whether their chances were undercut by Biden's refusal to yield earlier. This account of how the White House functioned with an aging leader at the top of its organizational chart is based on interviews with nearly 50 people, including those who participated in or had direct knowledge of the operations. Many of those who criticized Biden's insularity said his system nonetheless kept his agenda on track. White House spokesman Andrew Bates said Biden earned the most accomplished record of any modern commander-in-chief and rebuilt the middle class because of his attention to policy details that impact millions of lives. Bates, who rejected the notion that Biden has declined, added that the president has often solicited opinions from outside experts, which has informed his policy making. He said, it is the job of senior White House staff to have high-level meetings regularly and that they were executing Biden's agenda at his direction. He also said that staff alerted the president to significant negative news stories. Bernal, via the White House press office, declined to comment. This is a lie. They literally limited his interaction with the outside world. They also limited the negative press coverage. It's like a child. We had like a kid running the country. There were good days and bad days. The president's slide has been hard to overlook. The structure was also designed to prevent Biden, an undisciplined public speaker throughout his half-century political career, from making gaffes and missteps that could damage his image. You guys know, Andrew Bates also famously said this, my favorite tweet of all time, to answer the question on everyone's minds, no, Joe Biden does not have a doctorate in foreign affairs. He's just that good. White House senior deputy press secretary and deputy assistant to the president. And my goat, Andrew Jedediah Bates. We beat Medicare. Okay. So this entire article details how they limited Biden's public interactions, how they sheltered him from the truth, and how because Biden was woefully incompetent and genuinely demented, that basically most of this administration's achievements and most of the steps that they took were not directed at the top by Joseph Robinette Brandon. What is happening with this piece? What the hell? But instead, they were handled by specialists that were placed in front of him. It's something that we already knew, and it's something that we talked about, and it's something that was very easy to predict. This is something that I've been saying since 2019, talking about how ridiculous it is that Democrats are going to drop the incumbent's advantage by putting forth a person who will not be able to run for office again. Problem is, the Democrats, being the silly little incompetent party they are, refuse to put a successor as the vice president in the Biden administration and then build that person up. And this is precisely how we arrived at Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was not chosen because of her acumen, her charisma, or any sort of ideological predisposition that she has. Kamala Harris was chosen not to outshine Joe Biden, first and foremost. Kamala Harris was also packaged as a simple identity politics slot. Joe Biden actively said, I'm going to pick a black woman. Yes, here is something I said in 2020. One truly wild thing that we haven't really talked about is Biden's stated interest in being a single-term president. Like we're just going to throw away our incumbent advantage because Joe's going to be a vegetable by the end of his presidency. Truly incredible stuff. Joe Biden chose to look at the smears that the Republicans oftentimes apply to any person that is not white or a man, DEI, and adopt it and say, yes, I'm doing a DEI candidate. Now, this doesn't mean that Kamala Harris didn't have the bona fides, right? I think that, you know, she has, her resume is decent. Maybe not for presidency, maybe not for vice presidency, but it's still, she's a competent person. Problem is, that's not what she was chosen for. She was chosen because she would not be able to outshine the demented president. A lot of this stuff unfolded when he also had the special counsel interview him, Robert Hur, right? That was his name, I believe. That interview surrounding the classified documents investigation showed, according to her own assessment, that Joe Biden was incapable of remembering key details about his own life, and that if presented in front of a jury, would come across as a bumbling old fool who was well-intentioned. If you recall, the media was very upset about this detail being revealed. Feel like he was a little bit vindicated, don't you think? He was. He was vindicated because he was right that Joe Biden was a doddering old fool. They insulated him nonetheless and had a relatively adversarial relationship with the media, despite the reality that the media played ball with the Biden administration, in my opinion, with the exceptions of the Afghan withdrawal, which was one of the only good things that Joe Biden did in terms of his foreign policy accomplishments. You sound like Fox News. Shut the fuck up. So now this fool's sucking Trump now too. Hassan kissing the Trump ring now too. Yes. That's what I'm doing. Just like I was doing that all the way back in 2019 and in 2020 when I said Joe Biden should not be the candidate. He is far too old. That's what I was doing. I was kissing. I was bringing up every mistake that I talked about in this campaign cycle, even in the Kamala Harris truncated campaign. It was actually done not because I wanted a more competent Democratic Party, because I understood that Trump's fascist second reign would be devastating for not just the United States of America, but for the rest of the planet. But it was actually because I was secretly hoping that the Democrats would hear what I was saying and do the exact opposite so that they would lose to Donald Trump. You found out my schemes, chatter. You figured it out. It is pretty funny to be this much of a Democratic Party loyalist at this stage when you have Democratic strategists on CNN turning around and basically sounding like me months after the election defeat, even though originally they were institutional defenders. Kind of interesting, don't you think? They're coming to that recognition as well. When I criticize the Democratic Party, I don't criticize the Democratic Party because I cynically want the Republicans to win. I criticize the Democratic Party because I want them to be a competent counterbalance to growing fascism in this country, because that is the only game in town. The unfortunate reality is that we exist under a duopoly, either the Democrats or the Republicans. I recognize that, which is why I reserve my criticisms with the hopes that the Democrats, you're all Monday morning quarterbacks. No, as a matter of fact, I'm not a Monday morning quarterback. Okay? I'm a Sunday quarterback. I'm calling out the plays while it's happening. There's a difference between claiming that this is analysis in the aftermath of a resounding defeat. But the irony, of course, is that I quite literally was doing this analysis while the failure was happening, warning that this would be a dangerous gamble. Also, I showed you a tweet from 2020 that is far before the next NFL season started. I don't know how you would consider this Monday morning quarterbacking when it was clear criticisms from way before the devastating results of not implementing a change. Wild that you fail to comprehend this and still angrily lash out. Very interesting. There are definitely a lot less liberals who operate like this nowadays, but it's always cool to see one that, you know, still has that dog in him, where the real fight is actually not pushing the Democrats to actually legislate in a competent manner or fight in a competent manner, but instead to call out those who correctly called out the Democratic Party and refuse to learn a single lesson from this electoral defeat. Those numbers are diminishing. People like that are no longer as loud. Part of it is because they believe whatever they saw in mainstream press, okay? And they were horrified with the reality they thought they existed in when they obviously had to inevitably reckon with the reality that actually does exist. You were all over Kamala's nuts when you thought she'd win. I don't think this person has watched any commentary from me because I was not. Even in the most hopeful moments, I reserved a little bit of skepticism because of the many years of seeing how the Democrats have operated. I suspect, considering that you've been following me since last month, maybe you were oblivious to that reality. Or perhaps even funnier, you literally left the community, which you didn't, but it would have been even funnier if you had left the community because I was criticizing Kamala, only to come back in now. The woke agenda has ruined everything in NA. It's true. 49.9 PV percentage PV is not a landslide victory. No, but it was a resounding defeat for the Dems. Yeah. A lot of the people who are still chirping and still angry at the fact that like the Democrats keep bringing me up as a Joe Rogan of the left, those people were also consistently saying, I am not with Kamala Harris enough. I wasn't sufficiently backing Kamala, using my massive platform to back Kamala Harris unconditionally. Yeah, this entire thing is, this entire article is vindication. And all of the media coverage surrounding this Wall Street Journal reporting is basically them engaging in the age-old process of ass covering. To be like, oh, well, we couldn't have known. Or, oh, well, you know, maybe he wasn't that bad. Or if he was that bad, well, it's really fucked up that they didn't let us know that he was that bad. It's not our fault. And the irony of the story is that Joe Biden's mental faculties being diminished wasn't a secret. It was something that even the dumbest Republicans were aware of. Ewok Bandit, thank you for the 10 gifted subs.
Or another. And this kind of shielding President Biden, lying to the American people, telling them, don't believe your lying eyes, is yet another reason why President Trump was so successful. Because people just don't trust what they're being told. When they see clearly there was a decline in President Biden, and you're told, don't believe your own lying eyes, nothing to see here, people go, all right, what else are they lying to us about?
He also, in this lame duck period, has, I mean, look, we talk about all the time how Democrats ran on Trump being a threat to democracy, but just listen to what has changed between January of 2024 and just yesterday.
Trump's assault on democracy isn't just part of his past. It's what he's promising for the future.
I think it's pretty crazy when you have a Roy Moore strategist openly communicating on CNN instead of being shunned out of every public space. Roy Moore famously is the former Alabama Supreme Court Chief Justice who ran for the Alabama Senate seat and actually lost to a Democrat. Why did he lose to a Democrat? Because he was outed as a pedophile. That is wild. That is wild that like a Roy Moore staffer goes on CNN and gets to do commentary. What is going on? The media keeps saying we are hemorrhaging support. We are hemorrhaging support. People no longer trust us, without recognizing that perhaps this plays a role in why people no longer trust you.
He's being straightforward. He's not hiding the ball. The fact that he doesn't abide by the rules of the democracy we've established is not my concern. My job is to make a transition workable and available.
That's hard to watch. And I've got nothing for you. I got no excuses for certainly. I think all of America sees what's going on here. I will say I was at the White House this week for a Christmas party, and Joe Biden talked for about 10 minutes. He cracked some jokes, and he was pretty lucid, and it was a good. But it certainly was not prepared, in my opinion, to run the country. I do think we need to go back to the conversation that was happening on the campaign trail, and that's about
Republican former Georgia Lieutenant Governor talking to a Republican strategist side by side with a Republican pedophile campaign strategist. Okay, a campaign strategist for a Republican pedophile. This is what CNN is at. This is the grouping that they thought. This is the grouping that they thought would provide reliable commentary. They're giving it to the Republicans. They're like, well, you guys called this out, so here's your opportunity to have this conversation. There are a ton of people. There are even Democrats who called this out. Have Castro on. I don't care that these guys are, never Trump Republicans or whatever. I just don't give a shit. There are even Democrats who called this out early on. Fuck it, have Dean Phillips on. You know what I mean? Have Cenk on. Have members of the left on this panel. Yeah, Fidel Castro. That's what I'm talking about.
Age limits. I think we've got to start figuring out what that looks like. Boardrooms that have billions and billions and billions of dollars of investor money does that. And I know we talk about voters need to have the right, the opportunity to cast those votes. But I do think age limits on that position, it is the most demanding job anybody's ever held in their entire life.
I'm not for age limits because I do think voters, that's something you can easily.
There are 3 Republicans on here. I just want you to understand. There are 3 Republicans on this panel and like 2 conservative Dems. What is this panel? Who is this panel for? Like, it's kind of funny because like all this stuff is not actually working to chip away at Fox News's base, Fox News's audience. Like Fox News audience members are not going over to CNN and being like, well, these are our guys on there. Let's watch CNN now. Like they still think it's the Clinton News Network. Okay. It's just not, this is not actually bringing ratings back.
Discern. And people were discerning that when they were turning against Joe Biden. I just have to ask when the accountability is going to come for every single person who sat in front of a television, who held some position of responsibility and lied their rear end off about what they were seeing behind closed doors. People came on television and said, oh, I'm with him all day and he's really engaged and he's doing the job and he's running circles around us and these videos are cheap fakes and on and on and on. Brazen lying by people who work for our government and they lied to us about it.
What do you have in mind in terms of accountability?
I don't know, but if I were in Congress or...
I noticed a few months ago, everyone on CNN is either a Republican, a former Republican, not by their choice, or a Democrat who really wishes they could be a Republican. Yes, it's not just CNN, it's MSNBC as well. Many of the panelists in mainstream media are occupied by former Bush communication strategists, campaign managers for Republicans. They rarely ever have. It's most of mainstream media. Fox News is dominated by current Republicans, and every other mainstream outlet is dominated by former Republicans and also current Republicans alike. It's crazy. It's actually wild. And it's not, you're all kissing the ring now. It's disgusting. What? Brother, I don't think you can understand. For all you ring-kissing clowns, Fox lied about everything. You're all kissing the ring now. It's disgusting. I don't think you understand anything that's going on. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm sorry, but I think you're a little confused. And maybe your brain is short-circuiting a little bit. And it's understandable, especially if you just ate a steady mainstream media diet of thinking Kamala Harris was doing Brad Summer. And then when your expectations were not met with the reality of a resounding defeat, you are now looking desperately to lash out at anyone and everyone. CNN, MSNBC, ABC, you all sucking Trump. If you think I'm sucking Trump's, you're unfortunately mistaken. I'm going to be nice. I'm going to be as nice as I can, but you should probably stop hallucinating. Okay? As I have said time and time again, the reason why I dislike the Democrats is because of their closeness to Republicans. I am the only one who actually dislikes the Republican Party. Democrats who regularly hug and kiss the Republicans and try to present themselves as Republican adjacent, I despise them because of their proximity to the Republican Party and their agenda. Okay? Nobody, if given the opportunity between the diet version and the full-strength soda, is going to go with the diet soda. Everyone's going to go with the full-strength soda, in the words of Felix Biederman. The Democrats have consistently tried to retriangulate their image as a lighter version, a softer, more smarmy, elitist, smug, technocratic version of the Republican Party, and they keep failing over and over and over again. Oh my God, everybody stop hyper-focusing on the analogy by being like, oh, you don't understand. I prefer the diet soda. Says you like diet soda, except soy cucks.
If I were the incoming administration, I would be thinking about, because I agree with you on institutional trust. I think there is a lack of trust across the board. It's happening in your party. It's been happening in my party. how do you ever regain trust if there's no accountability for the people who lied us into the deficit in the first place? That's my question.
And if I'm a Democrat, I would never hire anyone who helped perpetrate this to be in a future administration. How can you regain trust the American people if you're putting the exact same people back who lied to them?
I think you're opening up a Pandora's box if you want to start investigating people who lie on behalf of their president, because one day there's going to be a Democrat in office after Donald Trump leaves, and I promise you, you don't want that to be happening to your party. But I will also...
I mean, I don't think the people give a shit. Yeah, I love that. Don't threaten me with a good time, please.
Also say, to your point...
I don't agree with that.
You don't? You
Because-
think Donald
but
Trump's been honest?
here's
The
what
people around him have been honest?
Here's what I think. If you go to work for the government and you stand up at the podium like Karine has done and knowingly and fully lie to the American people because you know full well what you see behind the scenes and what you're saying in front of the podium, I mean, maybe the accountability is they never get hired again.
Like it was
But
the largest inauguration crowd in the
Is that
history.
as consequential as this? I'm
But
just asking.
it's a lie.
well,
But it's a lie. It's a lie.
That's so funny that they got the Republican strategist dunking on them. It's crazy. I mean, he's not even wrong. This guy is gaslighting Wolf. He's not wrong. Yes, Trump and members in his orbit lie all the time too. So bring up a better point than the inauguration numbers, okay? Talk about how Donald Trump denied the election results. Donald Trump has never had a moment. Donald Trump contradicts himself in the same sentence half the time. The best thing you got there is inauguration crowd sizes? Like, what are we doing? Are you insane? Like, even when they have controversy, it's still managed controversy. It's like, it's done on the boundaries of things that are relatively, they're marginal, they're inconsequential. That actually hates Republicans, okay? I'm going to say it. I'm saying it, dude. I think Democrats don't hate Republicans as much as I do, okay? They love saying, oh, I guess you want to vote for Trump then. But like, dude, you don't hate Republicans. You want them in your party. You desperately advocate for them to come to your party. You literally have them at your convention. You have them at your convention. You have them come and speak at your convention. You literally have their loyal soldiers come speak at your convention, the border guards, the cops. Like, you love them. You want to the Republicans. You want to hug the Republicans. You want to kiss the Republicans. You want to be Republican. You want to be Republican. You're just a Republican. I hate Republicans. You don't. You want to and you want to suck them. Okay? So stop with this bull. I was in a hotel room after the this was the final night of the DNC when I was saying this. My neighbor in my hotel room came to my door and complained, even said, I actually agree with a lot of the things you're yelling about, but can you please pipe down? That's what he said. Very funny moment in Hasanabi broadcast history.
Systemic problem, right? Because I agree with your comments around.
Who?
All right, let's watch the five lap up, do their victory lap over Brandon's senility.
Who is running our country? That's the question everyone is asking after a bombshell report from the Wall Street Journal blew the lid off Joe Biden's declining mental state and how the White House has been covering it up right from the very start. According to the Journal, signs that the commander-in-chief was diminished stretched all the way back to, quote, the first few months of his presidency, with aides adjusting his schedule, noticing Joe becoming tired if they went long, and he started making mistakes. So they kept meeting short and started controlling who he spoke with. And like a good little lapdogs, the media aided and abetted the cover-up. Remember this lunacy?
F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second.
I'm not even going to ask a question on that. It's so absurd. Jesse, they say that the 50 sources say they noticed in the first few months that he couldn't handle things. But do you remember they're using COVID as an excuse for him not to campaign, not to get out there and to have the basement campaign where, remember, cars, they would beep If they supported Joe Biden, there were 8 of them.
Yeah, so they kept the COVID structure throughout the rest of the presidency. And he was treated like an aging dictator, an aging king. You know, the same things they said about Trump were true of him. He was isolated. He was out of touch. He was.
It's pretty funny because they have like so much good footage of him just being a bumbling old fool, stumbling around. You know what I'm saying? It's just, there's so much good coverage on here. They get to do this victory lap because even though they were doing it on partisan reasons, they were still correct. Even though they were doing this on partisan grounds, they still stand corrected. It also, once again, plays a role in undermining the integrity in the eyes of the broader public of mainstream outlets and makes it seem like Fox News was right all along. So that's a bit of a self-goal, a bit of a self-own from mainstream outlets once again.
Mentally unfit. People were keeping things from him. They wouldn't give him bad polling. They wouldn't give him bad headlines. He was AWOL during the lead up to Afghanistan. People were trying to get him on the phone at key moments. There's no way to get a hold of the guy. And he delegated his presidential powers to his staff, Judge. So when people ask, well, who's really the president? It was his staff. His staff were executing the duties of the president. And I think it was April 2021, right out of the gate, they were canceling meetings because he was having a bad day. So all this conspiracy theory about, Joe Biden shot, he's a puppet, it was true. I mean, at this point, we're going to find out he stole the election from Trump. At this point, the way things are going.
Jesse?
I'm just saying the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if we found that.
The amazing part of it, Charlie, is that Jill Biden was in charge of the one cabinet meeting they had in 11 months. Jill Biden was the one who campaigned in 2020. She out-campaigned her husband, Joe. Jill Biden is the one that people had to go through to get to. Jill was one who they had to go through to get to Joe. Why was she so desperate for this?
I guess, we don't know, but I guess it was because she was desperate to cling to the White House and to remain relevant and remain in the White House, because we don't have any other better answer than that. Obviously, this is all Joe Biden's responsibility. He's the one that allowed this to happen, but she bears a lot of responsibility for allowing it to happen to her husband. It's embarrassing. It wrecks whatever legacy he might have had. He leaves office the most unpopular president in the history of polling. And I also think that, and I hope that the people that are around him that lied to him, lied to us, lied to everybody, and kept this Weekend at Bernie's charade going all this time, don't escape scrutiny, and people don't forget that what they did to us. They talk about destroying democracy and taking democracy away. Yeah. There's no greater example of destroying democracy and taking it away than actually having the person that got elected they lied to him about, they shielded him from outsiders. They lied to him even as late as the campaign. They were lying to him about his pollsters, about his polling. They wouldn't let him talk to his pollsters. So even he didn't have any idea how bad things were going into the summer. There's a lot of blame to go around for everybody. Joe Biden is most responsible, but I hope that nobody forgets that what these staffers did to undermine democracy.
Dana, the interesting thing is that before Joe Biden spoke to this special counsel, Robert Hur, for 1 week, he would spend 3 hours every day prepping. And the only thing that we got out of it was Hur said, this is a friendly guy, an elderly man with no memory. And this was the point where Putin goes into Ukraine, where Hamas attacks, where Joe was actually funding Iran, which is then funding Hamas. And it's one of the darkest periods in American history. And yet Joe is still there clinging to power in the last, 5 weeks or whatever it is. What do you think he's trying to do now?
I just had a thought that occurred to me, so let me just use my words here and see if I can get it out. When the Robert Hur report came out, do you remember there was a fury from the White House that Merrick Garland let it go out? And I have to wonder if Merrick Garland made sure it went out so that he at least would have been like, yeah.
They can't even be right. Like they still have to basically, engage in some level of some kind of conspiratorial reach, even when they're on the correct side, even when history has vindicated their position.
Trying to tell people, like, this was what was happening. One of the things in the article is that they scripted his interactions with his defense secretary, Lloyd Austin. No wonder Biden had no idea Lloyd Austin was missing in action for 3 weeks. They never spoke anyway, and if they did, there was a script. It's not a call center. He didn't have a way to communicate directly with his Treasury Secretary. No wonder they never talked about inflation as a problem for Americans. You had the Chief of Staff saying it was a high-class problem. Then you think of those historians who would visit the White House, including writing speeches for Joe Biden, and telling him, you could be bigger than FDR. They weren't trying to have historical analysis. They were trying to make history with somebody who couldn't make his own decisions. Think of these people also. Annie Linsky of the Wall Street Journal wrote a piece 2 weeks before the debate between Biden and Trump, where the charade is exposed. And the White House came down on her like a ton of bricks. And she had said, like, I wrote this not because I wanted to hurt Joe Biden. It was like more in sadness than in anything. I'm having to write this. I have 40 sources, and I'll never forget that. The spokespeople from the White House just trying to destroy her reputation and her life. What sweet justice for Annie Linsky and her co-writers there. The last thing I would say is Kamala Harris is absolutely complicit in the cover-up.
Exactly. And that's where I was going to Jessica. You know, what happened in this White House was something that I don't think America has seen ever. We all knew what was going on. We sat at this table and actually thought about what was clearly the cognitive decline of a bobbling, dithering man. And then we were.
How much blame would you assign to Biden versus the staffers over the genocide? I still assign all the blame to Biden. I don't give a that like Biden was mentally diminished. It's the same with George W. Bush. George W. Bush is still the signatory, okay? George W. Bush, regardless of how stupid he is still signing off on all of these war crimes. I don't care that it was Dick Cheney that was the mastermind. I hate both of them. And also the staffers suck too, make no mistake. I'm just saying that there is no abdication of responsibility, okay? This is boring.